Well, it would be natural, would it not? Particularly if people were fed up to the back teeth of living in Caesar's domain, it would be natural that when they get into their own domain, when they can get something rolling for themselves, that actually the thing that would drive them would be rebellion against Caesar. So all the things that Caesar says that they can't do, they're going to go and do. So Caesar says, you must be faithful to one partner. No, screw that. Let's have a polyamorous community. It's natural that people are just going to go whoosh, completely to the other extreme.
Yep.
And maybe some of those communities will find their way back to the center, but I don't think many will.
No. Welcome, everyone, and thank you again to Richard Abbott for joining us once again. There's been quite a few of these conversations recently, and they've always been insightful and amusing. So hopefully one more of those, eh?
Yes, amusing. I'll try.
So, and one of the particularly amusing comments you made last time was about Saint Greta. I enjoyed that a lot. Thank you for that. But the point you were making there really stuck with me, and it's relevant to this conversation, which is going to be about community. You made the point that Saint Greta and her minions are pointing at the UK as this evil place for starting the Industrial Revolution, which was wholesale a bad idea, shouldn't have been done. We need to pay for it now. So I'm familiar with that perspective. Perhaps it is a bit more militant than it was when I had that point of view, when I was involved in environmental charities and the sustainability movement and all of that. Then have since come to see it all as a bit silly. But I had questions following our last conversation about whether I was throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because you made the point the industrial revolutionaries were trying to break the stranglehold of the agricultural feudal economy in Europe at the time, which they saw as a bad thing. And so they were trying to revolutionize the way we lived. But I've had the sense for a good long while now, since before I got involved in environmentalism and sustainability movement even, that it would be better for us to live in small agricultural communities, perhaps with a feudal nature, so there's a landlord, and so as long as the relationships were well. So I'm sure there's all sorts of pitfalls to that. The people I used to associate with, and even myself, we look back at that as some sort of golden age, not recognizing how back-breaking the work was and how really difficult the circumstances were for people living in those situations. But I wonder if there's any good that we can, are there any gems, any babies we've thrown out from that time that we can reclaim to apply to living better within community now? Any and all thoughts welcome.
Well, I mean, what you're describing sounds to me like a decentralized community, decentralized way of living. Mm-hmm. Decentralization is all the rage now. Social media, I'm not really a fan, but social media has decentralized. YouTube has decentralized the media and communications. Yeah. Cryptocurrencies, which are plus and minus, but cryptocurrencies threaten to decentralize the currency banking system. So there's a whole movement series of movements towards decentralizing the state, breaking down Caesar's monolithic power into, which would of course weaken Caesar's power, and then individual groups going their own way. This has been ongoing for a while. It seems like a good idea, but we'd have to be careful. We'd have to be careful of a number of things, I think. Communities, big or small, doesn't matter how big or small they are, will only work if the individuals that compose them are individuals. They will not work if there is sameness. If you have sameness, you have stagnation. It doesn't matter whether it's big or small, and maybe you have 100 same people who all think exactly the same, or 100 million people who all think exactly the same. It's sameness. It's not strength. It's presented as strength. It's not strength. Sameness, and it's therefore weakness. Yeah. And therefore that's what causes the collapse of communities, large or small. So communities, whatever size they're going to be, they've got to be composed of people who know who they are and who know what they're for.
Yeah, well, sovereignty along the lines of our previous conversation.
Yeah, but it's crucial. It's crucial because the idea, for example, that so let's pretend we're going to make a decentralized community somewhere on a piece of land somewhere. Okay, lots of problems with that, but let's pretend we're going to do it. The idea that you or somebody else or me are all equally interchangeable into various jobs and roles in that community. That idea is absurd and ridiculous. It simply will not work, and is not the case, because everybody has individual tendencies, individual skills, which need to be maximized. Now, it might sound obvious, but of course it's not the way that our current society is constructed. Our current society is constructed on the basis of you're given a job role and you perform that for as long as you know, for a given amount of time, and then you're oiked out and somebody else goes into your job role, because them doing your job role is just the same as somebody else doing that job role. So the job roles are what counts in our current society. If you're going to have community, it's got to be individuals that count, and roles come second.
Yeah. Okay. So in this model agricultural community, then it would be counterproductive to say, well, we all need to be doing a bit of farming, we all need to be putting up some fences, we all need to be doing a bit of childcare and education. That wouldn't work, because some people would be suited to one, the others maybe none of those, and something that's totally unrelated to land management, for example, right?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious example of that is that there's no point trying to get somebody that is 6'4" and super muscly and very, very strong indeed. No point getting them to go and do the teaching of the kids if somebody else, therefore, who is 5'7", weighs 8 stone, and has never lifted more than a bag of sugar in their lives, is put out in the field. I mean, that's obvious. Yeah, it's overlooked sometimes. It's obviously the case that either that's got to be a swap, or people have got to find their own way, find their own place.
Yeah. Okay. So
you can't. Sorry, but this is the problem, because you can't find your own place unless you know what you're all about. So the difficulty in looking back to how things were is that people didn't find their own place. They were given their place. They were told what their place was.
Yeah, by their law.
Unless the person that's going to do the telling, is super wise and super strong and super amazing, philosopher king type person, then that ain't going to work. And of course, they're not going to be, so it's not going to work.
No, indeed. So it's just another form of seasoning, going back to that sort of feudal situation where either the landlord, the feudal lord, or the collective policies determine what roles exist, and then therefore somebody should fit those. All that Caesar.
Absolutely. In the same way, for example, that in our current society, expecting all children and encouraging and in some cases cajoling all children to go to university is a completely absurd idea, because some will be much better off with learning technical, hands-on, practical type skills. And not everybody is geared for academia. And they're not better or worse for that. It's just that not everybody is geared to academia. And putting them in academia is destroying their life chances, really, because they're never going to be able to be successful in it. Yeah,
because they're focusing, they're setting the intention, which is a very powerful thing, to move down that channel, which is totally off track for themselves.
Yeah, the fact that the collective, the community decides through a vote and electing a government that our society wants to send as many people as possible to university doesn't make it right. Quite the opposite, in fact. Definitely doesn't make it right.
Okay, so we're jumping between the big society of big community of our society and small, potentially agricultural communities in the past and now. But do you have any examples of have you got any specific examples of people trying to create communities now, other than the vagaries that we've just come out with, that are coming across troubles, perhaps don't realize their troubles, they're not doing very well with it? You think of anything off the top of your head now?
I would say that there's people involved in this who wouldn't like me saying it, I think, but I would think that places like the Findhorn community, spiritually orientated community in Scotland, is a prime example of this. Prime example of this. Prime example of how it might start off with a good intention, but it becomes sameness.
Yeah.
And actually then that generates problems, because you're not talk about diversity. They're not attracting a diversity of people. They're attracting a monolithic idea of people.
Yeah.
So, and it's not even that they're being allowed, that the members of that community are being allowed to follow their own path. They're told that they're allowed to follow their own path, but only if it is in accordance with the goals of the community.
Okay.
So there's self-contradiction.
Yeah.
There's internal contradiction in all of this. To me, the only way that you go forward with any form of community is when it is composed of people who are self-aware, or at least some way along the path to being self-aware.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, and that's gauging how far is enough for them to be able to then engage properly in community is a big question, I suppose. Do you have any answers around that?
Well, I mean, you probably do have to have a leader of some kind. I don't have any answers, but I don't think that a lot of the ways that this is being approached by people are likely to generate anything at all.
No. Okay.
I mean, I don't wish to be super controversial for the sake of it, and I'm not saying that I have all the answers. I don't have all the answers, but I'm not entirely convinced that even democracy is the way forward with these things. And I appreciate how that sounds. I appreciate that sounds horrendous, but you're going to look at the situation that we have in our society now, which is the product of democracy. See that there's a lot of problems with democracy. So people say, well, okay, well, what are you advocating instead? I'm not. I'm just putting the question. I'm just putting the question mark that if people really want to do decentralized, start again from scratch, locally orientated communities, maybe the whole model, the whole way that they approach it has to be completely different. Okay.
Yeah. It's interesting that you talk about democracy in that way. Was it Plato who said 2,500 years ago that democracy devolves into tyranny? Was that right? Is that the next stage down?
That was what I think it's what he predicted, yes. And then Aristotle, who went on afterwards, I think said similar, that it wouldn't, it's not that it should move to another stage, but that inevitably, as night follows day, that democracy would eventually move into tyranny. And really, again, I mean, I appreciate it might sound overblown, but I think that's really where we are now. We are absolutely in a tyrannical situation now, but it masquerades as democracy.
Okay. And maybe that's obviously spin on behalf of the folks in charge, but if it's inevitable, it makes you question all the hoo-ha and all the aggravation that people are feeling regards this pending, perhaps, totalitarianism we're seeing in the Western world right now. Is there a point in getting all pent up about it if it's just a natural part of a cycle anyway?
Maybe there isn't much point getting all pent up about it, but it is. I think it is necessary to see what's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it became obvious. It looked like it was going this way before, but it became obvious in the aftermath of the Brexit referendum, where, regardless of what you think about it, because you think, well, it should stay, should go. That's a secondary question. The real question was, why was there a group of people who were intent on subverting the result of the vote? And they absolutely were. They absolutely were. And I know this factually and evidentially. Yeah. There was a large group of people who were intent on making sure that democratic vote was not carried out.
Yeah.
And to me, that was the emergence, that was the coming into visibility of what had been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
That democracy is either dead or on its last legs.
Yeah.
because they're convinced it's not just that it's a malicious agenda. The people who try to subvert democracy are convinced. They're convinced that they're right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not. They're not sitting there plotting, going, "Oh, we know we're doing terrible things, but let's do them because then we can enrich ourselves." It's not that. It's not what it is. They think that they're right. They're absolutely locked into their own self-righteousness.
Mm-hmm.
That actually is worse. That's actually a worse situation.
It's more of a self-oriented as opposed to God-oriented crusade.
Well, so we link back to the idea of how do you have a decentralized community, because you can't have a decentralized community. You can't build any kind of community without self-aware people, and you don't get self-awareness if you're self-righteous. That's the problem. If you're utterly convinced that you would go on television and scream and shout about it, you're utterly convinced that you're right, and you're not interested. You're just not interested in hearing an alternative point of view. You're not interested in even considering it for 1 second. You're so locked into the image of yourself that you have in the mirror, and that is where so many people are at. When you've got that situation, there's zero self-awareness. So go back to where you started about St. Greta. Whatever she is, she has zero self-awareness. Zero self-awareness. But so many people have zero self-awareness. You can't build anything with people like that. You can't do anything with people like that.
No.
Because it's going to be all about reinforcing their own narrative. It's like they're constantly looking in the mirror, trying to act something out that confirms what they already think about the world. It's just a game of charades for people like that. So the only way you build something different, you have to unplug completely from all that garbage. You have to unplug from it completely. And maybe there are environmental problems. I'm not disputing that. But the following the self-righteous, and you follow them over the cliff edge.
Yeah. Okay. And it's not, you can't blame her entirely. She's a 17-year-old girl. 17-year-olds are generally dumb, really, to the realities of the world.
She's brainwashed. I mean, never mind anything else.
Right. Okay. But we've got a society that's treating her like a prophet, which just speaks to the level of maturity in the general population, right?
Yeah, but it speaks to the degree to which people are looking in the mirror, and really that's all that they're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, virtue signaling is the phrase often used, but I think it doesn't really adequately describe what's going on. A lot of people are constantly looking in the mirror and and that's not a self-awareness examination. They're looking in the mirror to psychologically, emotionally preen themselves in some way. Okay. I'm a good person. I must do this. This demonstrates back to myself that I am a good person. They're in a feedback loop of, and it's born from a lack of self-awareness. It's born from the fact they don't really know who they are. So therefore, they've got to act something out.
Terrified that they might well be horrible people. So they're trying very, very hard to do good things, from what they can tell are good things.
Terrified that they might be horrible people. Maybe in some cases terrified that they might actually be good people, but that requires them to do something. Responsibility. Or no, thank you very much.
Easier to bash people on Twitter and then never actually go out your house.
Yeah, or bash people on Twitter and then still go outside your house. But it's whether you do that or not is not the point. It's the self-righteousness. It's the refusal to consider that there might be a way that they had not thought of. It's very defensive. A lot of these characters are very defensive. Don't bring me any information that's going to cause me to rethink, because I'm not into that. I'm not doing that. That's what they are basically saying.
Right. Okay. All right. So then there's this. I would agree. There's this movement into tyranny. It's already here. It's set to get worse. And there are other stages beyond that. We go back to the beginning of the cycle, and anybody can go and have a look at Plato's 5. What do they call 5 regimes? Something like that.
Yeah. The Republic is the book that it's in.
Yeah. So anybody can go and look at those. But if we're going into tyranny and we're going to more headlong into tyranny, it's going to be here for a while. Then again, though, there is this sense in me, it doesn't need to be necessarily agricultural, but that would make sense so that people can feed themselves, that there's a decentralization, but obviously it needs to be made up of people. These communities need to be made up of people who have some self-awareness, have gained some level of sovereignty, are able to engage with each other from an independent place, as opposed to just going along with the crowd and the messages and the policies of the group. Where do we start? Just reflection?
Well, I think the people have the power, in the sense that if you collect the right people, I think that the society will self-organize. But in order for it to self-organize, you have to have the self-awareness, and you have to eject, dispel, cast away the ideology. So, for example, you cannot, because it won't work. Right? This is the primary reason why you can't do these things, because they won't work. You can't build a community based on race. You never mind, take out the moral aspect of that. Just look at the fact that if you try to do that, it won't work. Mm-hmm. It won't work, because it means that you will be in a permanent state of conflict with other races. Yeah. You can't build anything on race. You can't build anything on any kind of ideology. You know, value systems, belief systems, political points of view. You'll not build anything on that, because you might need to be. You might sometimes need to be redistributionist in your community, and other times you might need to be arch-capitalist in your community. And if you're wedded to one of those points of view, you'll not survive.
Yep. Okay. So,
sorry, but I know that's maybe obvious, but the problem now is that politics is everywhere and it's in everything. And so many people and so many things now are political, but people don't think that they are. They think, loads of people think they've gone beyond politics, and all they're actually doing is parroting a political line.
This may be a tangent, but I really like the definition of politics that Arthur had. It was how people get along with each other, right? Arthur being your mentor, I think we talked about him in these sessions. So if we were to adopt that definition more when it came to dealing with people, politics is just our ability to get along, what would be the impact for community?
It would be great, but I would just remind you that that's not where we are, of course, because the object of what a lot of politics is now, and politicians and people who are involved in it, is not to get along. It's to demonize and it's to win. Yeah. So this is why Saint Greta, bless her, is an example. It's not just about her, but she's an example. She's a figurehead of a movement which has no interest at all, no interest in getting along at all. And again, you can't build anything with that.
Power and control.
That's only a destroying movement. It doesn't build anything.
Okay. We're right. Those people are racist, bigots, stupid, and therefore we need to take responsibility and tell them what to do, is the mentality. Right. Okay. All right. So it's still possible, though, for people to withdraw themselves from all this nonsense and to apply the better definition of politics and other better approaches to life. So can we talk about how the individual would engage with community, or the readiness, the stage of readiness perhaps, or the things they need to be working on through the lens of the 4 elements, so that they then be able to then start thinking about community? So in earth, water, air, fire, that's the order normally that you talk about it in. So with earth, what things do people need to be working on?
Well, if you're going to embark on this, you've got to be physically well and even strong, I think, because I don't think that we really fully appreciate how comforted and lazy and reliant upon creature comforts we've become. And I'd be the first to admit that I am. But you know, if you're going to go down this road of community, there's a lot of things that you simply won't have, which currently we take for granted. So earth is physicality. So physically, we've got to be, maybe we don't have to be Olympic style fitness, but we've got to be in good nick.
Yeah,
we've got to be in good shape, and we're going to struggle from day one. We're going to struggle from day one if we are physically wobbly in some way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
So that's an earth. And earth is all foundational. Everything to do with the earth is foundational. So
yeah.
It's the body. It's the physicality of the body.
Physicality of the body first, and you've talked about it extending to some level of order, some ability to order one's time, I suppose, but also the how important is it for the. See, I like this idea that there's multiple points of initiation within communities where everybody's working on their own thing, so they're sovereign within their self-awareness, but also that they are generating their own income. They have their own personal economy as well, which they can perhaps bring to the group and interact and exchange with those people with that vehicle as well. So would you say that's an essential precursor then, to be able to have some sort of personal economic engine?
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm just trying to be clear that earth is foundational. Yeah. And unless you've got physical health and well-being,
good health, yeah, okay,
then you're struggling. I mean, just to broaden it out, one of the drivers of the insanity around coronavirus, okay, not the coronavirus itself, which is a thing, it's a real thing, it's a real problem. We don't want to catch it, it's not a good situation.
No.
But the insanity that surrounds it and the policies that have been acted as a result of it, that's a different order of madness. And all that madness is born from the fact that so many of us, and I would have to put myself in this category, so many of us are not in good physical shape. And therefore we rely upon the structures of Caesar, we rely upon the NHS. What's this worship of the NHS? It's not a worship of some ideal of how we ought to be as a caring and compassionate society. It's born of a fact that most people are absolutely reliant upon it.
Yeah.
And you may say, well, I'm not, but so many people are.
Yeah.
So many people are. They're on meds, they're in the doctor every 5 minutes, hospital appointment here, there and everywhere. And I'm not judging, but we've got to a stage where physically a lot of us are not in a good shape.
No.
And I don't see how you build a fresh community, a fresh start from that position. Don't see how you do it.
Okay, all right. Worth thinking about, because I hadn't considered the implications of need to make sure everybody involved is in good shape, because good health is seemingly in short supply at the moment in our society.
It is.
Okay, so good health being an essential part of it, strength as well, so physical strength, perhaps resilience as well within yourself. So water, what do people need to be achieving there as a basic for community? So
water is related to feelings and emotions. And water, if it is not given a container, a glass, a cup, a channel, if it's not given boundaries, it will just go everywhere and make a complete mess. So what we have to have is emotional continence, if we would put it that way. In other words, the ability to notice our emotions and choose whether to heed them or not. So another sacred cow, we might as well slaughter this one as well. The idea that emotions are everything, that we have to follow our feelings at all costs, that feelings are the only reality. This is out there in society, and it's a very strong force now in our society. But I'm afraid it won't create anything constructive or positive or loving or helpful or reasonable, because feelings change like the weather. They are unsuitable for building anything upon. So we might say, well, these are my feelings today about this person or this thing, and I feel it very strongly, therefore I must follow it. Okay, no worries, but what are you going to do tomorrow when your feelings have changed? Because they will have done. They will have changed.
Yeah. That's the nature of emotions. Yeah.
It is the nature of emotions for them to be variable and changeable. And as a result, they're not reliable to build anything really upon, or at least they're not reliable by themselves. Yet they have to be matched up with thoughts. They have to be evidenced over time. Something real has to come from them. Otherwise, you're trying to build your sandcastle in the sea, and it will just get washed away.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So emotional continence. Does having good foundations through working on earth provide some sort of banks to the river there as well?
Yeah, it does. So Arthur, my old teacher, used to advocate, without any evidence or explanation, because that was his way, he used to advocate that you have, if you're trying to work on your intuition and sensitivity and self-awareness, that you have to have a very good, strong, hearty breakfast. Right. Not like a load of toast, because that slows you down, carbs, but fruit, protein, meat kind of stuff. It's essential.
Yeah.
Then not so long ago, I watched a clip video of Jordan Peterson basically saying the same thing. He was putting it in psychological terms. He was putting it in physiological terms. He was giving a bit more explaining to it. But let's put it this way. If you are super sensitive, if you're super emotional by nature, there's nothing wrong with that. That's all good. You're going to manage your emotions better if you begin the day with something in your belly. Mm-hmm. And it's almost to the point of you need to begin your day with something in your belly, even if you don't want to. Mm-hmm. Even if you don't get hungry in the morning. Mm-hmm. You need it because it grounds you. It puts you in your body.
Right. Yeah.
Much harder to control your feelings or your thoughts, come to that in a second, air, much harder to control those, much harder to manage those, much harder to have a good relationship with thoughts and feelings if you're not solidly in your body. And good food puts you solidly in your body.
There's something to ponder there for advocates of intermittent fasting. Skipping breakfast is something that's very popular at the moment, eh?
Well, I think it depends with the intention that you do it. If you're fasting and you're replacing, so if you're going to fast, then you have to replace the food with something. And if you replace it with God, then you may use your fasting to go on some kind of spiritual quest of some kind. That definitely is a thing. That definitely works. But if you are just fasting, and you're not replacing it with anything, well, I think the health benefits will be questionable, and I think they'll certainly be variable for each person.
Mm-hmm. And to learn about how to replace breakfast with God, read Soul Strong. You've got some information in there about that?
Thank you very much. Yes, yes, there are some chapters about this. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Okay. So can we quickly, we're running out of time, but can we say a little bit about air and fire as well? Some of the basics that need to be in place for us to function in community, perhaps.
Yeah. So air is to do with our thoughts, and it's very simple. You have to make sure that your thoughts are your own. This is another thing that we have in our society. So many people, if you're having a discussion with people, not in this case, but so many people, if you're having a discussion, you're not really having a discussion because they're not really telling you what they think, because they don't know what they think.
Yeah.
They know what they've been told.
Right.
They know what they've been programmed with. They are reciting somebody else's talking points. So I had a debate on social media about the vaccine, and the response from somebody was, "Get the damn shot. Get the damn shot." Speak your own words.
Yeah,
was my response. Speak your own words, because those are Joe Biden's words. Don't speak Joe Biden's words to me. Don't speak Donald Trump's words to me either. Speak your words to me, but they're incapable of speaking their own words because they don't have their own words, because they don't have their own thoughts. Not everybody, not all the time, but a lot of people are in this situation where what they say, it's not theirs.
No,
it's not theirs. And that's a misuse of the air element, or not a misuse, of failure to use the air element.
And just a note there for Jordan Peterson fans as well, I'm pretty sure word for word I saw that come from him on Twitter as well. Just get the damn shot. Stop messing about. Pretty sure I heard that.
Well,
yeah.
If it's anybody else's words, then it is a fair enough. I understand why people do it, but it's not. It reveals a lot about the person.
Yeah.
It's just an example, but it reveals a lot when people parrot other people's words, and people do it a lot.
Yes. Okay. Fair enough.
Fire. Well, fire is the spark. Fire is the spark of creativity that each of us have within us, the spark of divinity, the spark of God, if you want to call it that. It's the uniqueness. Fire is the unique aspect of us. So if we get the body in order, and we can have some emotional continence, and we can be thinking our own thoughts, then we've got a situation where we can be who we really are. We can act in the world in the way that only we can act, which will sometimes be good and right and strong, and sometimes be completely shambolic and chaotic, but it will be us. And I do think, as far as I'm concerned, when we are ourselves, truly ourselves, then we can self-organize. If I'm truly myself and you're truly yourself and somebody else is truly themselves, we can self-organize between us. And it flows much more naturally. But we have to be aware of what we are first.
Self-organization is perhaps the dream of anarchists. We don't need an overbearing rule because we can make it up between us because we're good enough, more competent enough to do so.
Yeah, except that anarchists, as I understand them, as I've met them, have no spiritual component to them. So I'm talking that there needs to be a spiritual component to this. In fact, if you don't have a spiritual component to it, it will be absolute chaos because it will then just be feelings and emotions and thoughts which guide the person, and it needs to be something bigger than feelings and thoughts which guide the person.
And that is exactly my experience within anarchists, and call them self-Marxists, probably aren't, communities who feel that we all need to be left alone, just get on by ourselves, but they can't wipe their own ass most of the time. These folks, they're at each other's throats, they're sleeping with each other's partners, they're just and they're taking all the drugs, they're just a mess. So I mean, that's one example of many of these community-oriented groups that are really fucking things up for themselves.
Well, it would be natural, would it not? Particularly if people were fed up to the back teeth of living in Caesar's domain, it would be natural that when they get into their own domain, when they can get something rolling for themselves, that actually the thing that would drive them would be rebellion against Caesar. So all the things that Caesar says that they can't do, they're going to go and do. So Caesar says, you must be faithful to one partner. No, screw that. Let's have a polyamorous community. It's natural that people are just going to go whoosh, completely to the other extreme.
Yep.
And maybe some of those communities will find their way back to the center, but I don't think many will.
No, and maybe it's a broad stroke statement, but I see a lot of quote unquote spiritual communities and anarchists and Marxists and all these folks who are rebelling against Caesar, personally probably just rebelling against their own dad.
Yeah.
As kids who haven't left that rebellious phase yet, which is a shame. But like you say, whether you are whether you're a follower of Muji and going along with that dogma, or Christianity, or neo-Marxism, doesn't matter. You're just fighting. You're fighting against daddy.
Yeah, to a large extent. I mean, each individual motivation can be different, and it is certainly true that even by going the wrong way, somebody can actually find the right way. So some good can possibly come out of these things in the long run, but you're right to identify it. A lot of these communities are, well, they're not well thought through, let's put it that way.
No, feelings based, like you say. Well, this feels better than going along with a corporate normal rule of life. Yeah, and maybe it is a better situation, but far from a better solution overall for everyone. Okay.
Well, hang on. So sorry. So that's the key point, isn't it? For everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you want to keep your community small, you don't care about keeping it small about that, then it's perfectly possible to set up a situation where your community is driven by anger and by hate, or by race, or by ideology, or by your own particular values, or you're rebelling against daddy, whatever. You can do all that. But you'll be small and you'll stay small. And if you want to live like that, that's fine, live like that. But you'll stay small, and ultimately it will collapse, because there won't be growth there, because you're not interested in catering for all. In fact, you're not even interested in catering for very many, because You've got a very select group of people who think exactly the way that you do, and that if you can't align with that, you're out.
So there is a need for what I'm taking from what you just said there, a need for these communities, if they are to be established by sovereign folks, for them to be integrated with the broader society, whether they agree with what the society is largely about or not. There needs to be some integration. Separationism doesn't really seem to work. You can't be outside of it. You're in Caesar's world.
Well, you're in Caesar's world, but yes, that's true. But what I meant more was that if people were really being themselves, and there was a real degree of self-awareness, then you would be able to have people in a community from different races, from different classes, from different levels of education, different age groups. You'd be able to have this. And all right, it wouldn't be happy, jolly unicorns and rainbows every day. It wouldn't be. There'd be arguments, there'd be discussions, there'd be disagreements, maybe violently. There may be, might get quite heated.
Yeah.
But if there was a degree of self-awareness, and if there was a degree of understanding of the uniqueness of each individual, then there would be a greater level of tolerance, and there would be a greater level of appreciation that, for example, that old white Tory git over there, who I don't agree with at all, actually is making a good contribution. Now, just to even have that possibility, would be a quantum leap forward, because that's not where our society is now. Our society now is, you can only make a good contribution if you believe this, if you're this age group, if you're this race, if you're this background. That's the tyranny that's being implemented.
Yeah.
That you can only make a contribution that's worthwhile if you believe and tick these boxes. And I'm saying, you get rid of all that. It is perfectly possible. It's the original Brotherhood of Man. I don't mean the band, the Brotherhood of Man, which is actually colorblind, and it's gender blind, and it's age blind, and it's class blind. Not class consciousness is not the answer. Racial consciousness is not the answer. They'll be blind to these things, as in, or at least transcending these things. Otherwise, there's no chance of people getting on at all, and there'll just be conflict.
Don't know whether to touch the hot potato of Black History Month. There's obviously a form of separation and othering going on in that. And one of the things I heard recently was, whilst it's great to celebrate important events, when you start telling the story of a people from oppression, from the beginning point being oppression and condemnation and slavery, what kind of tone does that set? What kind of way does that set them up in relation to everybody else? Have you got any thoughts on the value or not of Black History Month?
There could be any type of History Month that there needs to be. I've got no problem with it if that's my issue is when it's just lies. That's my issue. So this is slightly a tangent, but it's in my field of interest and field of expertise. It's slightly tangential to what you've said, but hopefully. Okay.
Yeah.
So I remember observing a long while ago, actually quite a few years ago, there was a movement in spiritual and religious community to place Black people at like the height and the top and the center of all forms of spirituality. And I remember having a conversation with somebody, a young Black woman, and she was basically like, well, but in terms of spirituality and occultism and magic and things like that, don't you know, she said, that once upon a time when we were in Africa, and we were kings and queens and emperors and empresses before we were enslaved, we could shoot magic bolts of lightning out from our fingers, and no white person has ever been able to do that. Now, quite aside from whether you believe any of that or not, the idea that no white person has ever been able to do that is completely divorced from history and literature, because the whole of Western society has in it the archetype of the the sage, magician, wizard type dude. Could even be a woman in certain situations, a Merlin type figure, Gandalf type figure.
Yeah,
those kind of things. And there's no rip-off there from Black culture. It's deeply embedded way back in Western history that you had those kind of characters. So I mean, I appreciate that's a bit left field from what you were saying, but it's the making up of falsehoods, or the distorting of the reality, distorting of the story, changing the story to suit.
Yeah,
that to me is the problem.
And just removes entirely the fact that we were all once African, right? And the earliest settlers of Europe were Black, apparently, as well. We're all of Black African descent, so it is our history.
Well, yeah. I mean, there is human history. I mean, there isn't white history, though many people say that there is white history. Therefore, they want Black history. Now, I understand it. I understand. Maybe if I was in those shoes, I would think similarly. But it's not a recipe for any kind of unity. It's not a recipe for any kind of unity at all. No.
Okay. So, earth, water, fire, air. So we need to be building ourselves to be robust physically. We need to be able to observe and manage, perhaps control in occasions, our emotions. We need to be able to, and just a disclaimer, this is not medical advice or mental health advice for anybody. This is two people reflecting on philosophy and history. And there, with air, is the ability to think your own thoughts instead of just going along with what other people say and just assuming it to be correct. And then there is recognizing our own and other people's uniqueness, and that uniqueness is a contribution that cannot be replaced, and thus tolerance emerges from that. These are the ingredients, basic ingredients for a community to function well, would you say?
These are the basic ingredients, and if it seems too much, then it begins with awareness. So it begins with awareness of the fact that maybe you could be healthier, and you could maybe try and do something about that. Awareness of the fact that your emotions do change from minute to minute sometimes, and noticing that, just noticing it, that's a huge beginning, to notice the fact that you felt that way on Monday and you felt a different way on Tuesday, and therefore, okay, I need to be aware of that. Awareness of the fact that it is so easy to not be thinking your own thoughts and to be actually just be regurgitating what somebody else has told you. Awareness of that, becoming aware of that, and then becoming aware of uniqueness, looking for it, seeing that there are no two people on the planet that are the same, and that there never will be.
Okay, right, excellent. These ingredients, just a tiny bit more clarification. So you've talked about good health. I mean, that seems to come from exercise, movement, sufficient movement, and the right diet. So people can go and look up how, do their own research around diet and movement. But any particular modalities you think are useful when it comes to emotional retention, what you were saying?
Well, so maybe what we have to do sometimes is to distinguish between emotions and thoughts. And maybe it's not always easy to distinguish between emotions and thoughts. But in every situation, you can tell yourself, you can notice what you feel and what you think. And if you can be aware that actually those might be two different things, or we'll go like this if you want, two different things, then you're halfway there. It's noticing that we've become very in love with our own thoughts and our own feelings, but the reality is that often they're not ours, and that even when they are ours, maybe they're not so great, maybe they're not so useful. Maybe the narrative that you're telling yourself about yourself today is actually just a load of BS. Maybe it is. Maybe what you feel about that person or that situation, maybe it's just rubbish. Maybe you won't feel it next week. Maybe you won't feel. Maybe you'll look back in 5 years' time and think, well, why was I wasting my time? So emotions and thoughts, even if they are our own, they're often very transitory, very temporary, and we get hooked into them very easily. And maybe we should not.
Okay. All right. So meditation, mindfulness, that sort of stuff comes to mind as practices, but it doesn't need to be branded. It's a matter of sitting and observing and trying to make sense of what's there, what's going on for you.
We're giving a brief intro here, but it is complex, because all these different, particularly the elements, they feed into each other. So, for example, if your earth is not strong, in other words, if your physicality is not optimum, then probably you're going to be in pain. If you're in pain, that is going to distort your feelings and your thoughts. Very hard to have clear, positive, uplifting thoughts if you're in physical pain. Very hard to do that.
Yeah.
So then you have to go right back to the start and try to address the physical body, and then it all starts getting, but then you have emotions and feelings about that.
Yeah.
So it is very hard to step out of all this. Maybe it's impossible to step out of all of this, but being aware, having some awareness of what's going on is tremendously helpful, although there is a bit of a ball of wool to untangle for most of us.
Right. Okay. Yep. Tangled ball of wool from the periods of time from our past when we weren't as aware and weren't able to make us informed decisions about how to manage ourselves. Okay. All right. Well, plenty covered there. Amusing and insightful, like I was hoping. So thank you for that.
Well, good.
And
good help.
and maybe there will be some more conversations down the road, but for the time being, this is the end of the planned series of conversations I wanted to have. And the key points here, guys, is that the world may be ending, but yours needn't. Personally, that it is important that we all seek personal sovereignty, that if we seek to genuinely have community in our lives, and that must come first, and community is very much a good thing if we can do it right. Okay.
And every ending is a new beginning.
Indeed. Okay. So tyranny, if that is indeed what we're facing, will present other opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Good. Okay. Well, thank you again, Richard.
Thank you, David. Nice to see you. Take care.
Yes.